Welcome to the Heart of Healthcare podcast.
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Heart of Healthcare podcast. I am your co-host, Steve Krause, and today I am super excited to have a friend, longtime colleague in the digital health industry, Dr. Reena Pande, on the pod. Reena is now currently a partner and leads Oxeon's Clinician Executive Search and Leadership practice, and I actually want to talk a lot about that with her today. But prior to Oxeon, Reena was a doctor, a cardiologist, had a very successful career at one of the leading academic medical centers, and then actually made a midlife career transition into the digital health world at actually a very early stage, and was one of the first employees at a very successful company called AbleTo, which ultimately sold to Optum United, and was an early leader in the digital health, mental health space, and then decided to transition to a career where she's helping other clinician executives make that same career journey. So much to talk about today. I think it's going to be such a unique perspective on what it's like to be a clinician, what it's like to transition to the business world, and ultimately what's it like to be a clinician executive. So Reena, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It feels very full circle to be here chatting with you. So I'm grateful.
Let me start. You get the opportunity to work with a lot of folks who probably look like well, you're still young, but look like an earlier version 1.0 of Dr. Reena Pande, thinking about the transition. And so I want to talk a lot about that today because I think a lot of listeners are in the clinician world and the executive world. What would you tell, a younger Reena who was thinking about jumping from being a doctor, who had grown up, I think, wanting to be a doctor, to making the jump to a really early stage Series A company?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And it is funny to look at it in hindsight and just kind of be, standing up and outside the experience and look at the decisions that I make. I would say it was way riskier than I think I realized, although I had de-risked it in more ways than I also realized. I think the first thing that I would tell folks is to know thyself. Like there's so much self-understanding and self-awareness that goes into making decisions about career shifts. And it's a lot of self-work to know what you love, what you're great at, what brings you energy, where you want to point that energy, what value you bring, what gifts you bring, right? And how you want to put them to best use. And I think in retrospect, I had been doing a lot of that work. It was a several-year journey between the Brigham and academic cardiology and making the leap ultimately to being the 10th person at AbleTo. But there was a lot of sort of introspection and curiosity that got me there. Now it sounds like a really short story. Oh yeah, I picked my head up and made a leap, but there was a lot of self-work I think that probably happened, and
what was that?
I tell people to start.
What was that self-work that you did? What does that mean? What's the work they need to do?
Yeah. I mean, I think you definitely. What it cannot be is a grass is greener type of leap.
Oh, like right? I don't like my job. I'm going to go try this.
Exactly. Being a clinician, being an academic is hard work. It's great work if you love it. Do it, right? But it's hard. And so I think there is a lot of dissatisfaction that points people to other careers in healthcare. But that's not sufficient, right? It's, dissatisfaction is necessary, but not sufficient to making a career move. And so I think you really have to ask yourself the hard questions. Who do I want to be when I grow up next? I tell people all the time, right? Like, what do you want to be next? And what are you really, really good at? Let's be honest. So I think the other questions you have to ask yourself are, what am I really good at, right? Am I someone who loves being a preacher, loves being a champion for high quality clinical care, for a particular way of delivering care with technology or data or what have you? Or am I a builder, right? Like, am I someone who loves being in spreadsheets and internally focused and oriented? I think those are questions that people have to start asking themselves. And what kind of risk tolerance you're willing to take, right? Are you willing to, and do you have the financial security, right, to jump into a startup and maybe take a lower salary than you might make as a practicing physician, but with the potential for upside down the road if you actually see success?
The equity works. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm curious. You said you said that you had de-risked AbleTo was risky. Let's be clear. When you joined, I looked at the investment and it turned out everything always looks greener in retrospect, as you said, but it was risky when you joined. So you said you had done work to de-risk it. I'd like to understand what that was. And you had also didn't realize how risky it was. So maybe you can hit on both those things for our listeners in terms of lessons learned.
Yeah. This appreciation of having de-risked it was a late observation, a recent observation. I wrote about it.
What did you do?
I wrote
Yeah.
about it in one of my blog pieces recently. What I realized in retrospect was that my people, the people around me, the network that I had built around me was
Like the
my
Liam Donahues of 406. Yeah, got it.
Yes, you nailed it, right? So the pre-work before I made the leap was a lot of what I call now ferocious curiosity and networking, right? It was just help me understand the space. I don't know anything outside of academia. I didn't know the word venture. I didn't know, what return on investment meant. I didn't know what EBITDA meant. I didn't know anything, right? So it was a lot of learning. And in the learning, it was a lot of relationship building. And that network was my de-risking. I knew, and I can see now that people like Liam and others were going to pick me up if I fell. It was super risky in retrospect.
Oh, so it's not even the point that I thought you were saying they're not going to lead you in the wrong direction. But even if they, of course, Liam's an investor like me, and I can't guarantee success of a company. Neither could you when you joined AbleTo. But it's more like, even if AbleTo doesn't work, and it's got a higher than likelihood chance that it works because of high quality investors in there, even if it doesn't work, Liam's going to watch out for you or help you on the next go round. Was that the idea?
Yeah. I felt like I had people who had my back in this one, but also, God forbid this was a failure, because frankly, many of them are, that I would have had people who would have helped me get up back on my feet. And the learning felt like de-risking, right? Like I was at an asymptote in my learning journey as an academic doc, and I was just salivating for an inflection point, like to keep learning. So for me, even if this didn't work out in the end, I felt like I would have learned so much from the experience of it that would stand me in good stead for whatever came next.
Fascinating. I love that. And I love the other point. It was more risky than you thought. And in truth, these things always are that way, right? Like you could do as much diligence as you want, even as an investor, when I have time and I have presumably the skill and experience to know what to look for. Still, you invest in these companies and they're inevitable surprises, right? Anything you learned there that you share with the folks you work with now, of like, how do you identify those things? Like, what did you learn from that experience that maybe you wouldn't do if you were doing it again?
Apart from 406 Ventures and Liam and like knowing him so well, he was sort of my diligence, honestly. I sort of trusted the work he had done, to the point you were just making, but I probably would have tried to do more diligence on the people and the company. I didn't know to do that back then. I'm a pretty trusting human. I think I went in trusting. The things that I loved the problem. I mean, the problem we were solving was a problem I had been noodling on for a long time. As a cardiologist, thinking about what are all the behavioral elements that are keeping our patients from improving their overall health, and for us to be able to lower total costs of care, right? This was so central to things that have been irking me for a long time. So the problem was something I really appreciated. The people I just thought were interesting and curious, and I liked the people, and they were interesting and curious, as you know, and I am indebted to them. But I probably could have done more homework on the whole setup.
Let's talk a little bit about AbleTo. Your point, the problem statement. It was one of the first companies, I think, that was the instantiation or the service offering that linked mental health conditions with physical health. And that, by the way, when you joined in what year? I mean, it was
2013.
Yeah. So this was like a few years after the Mental Health Parity Act, or not too far after. At that point, 2013, it's hard for people to believe now, but weren't recognizing mental health as a lot of people thought it was soft. I'll be honest with you.
100%.
It was not recognized as a real, and I think COVID, helped illuminate the challenges there. But you guys even went a step further. You were the first ones to actually show and prove that if you identified mental health conditions, you could serve other comorbidities and other chronic conditions. And I thought that was a really interesting part of the AbleTo model. So the fact that resonated with you, I guess, was a key diligence. You were going to make it work, even if there were challenges with the model or whatever. You just believed in this idea.
I did, and I was experiencing it on the ground as a practicing doc, right?
Yeah,
here we were starting to engage in value-based care arrangements, and we were getting thrown digital solutions of this, that, and the other variety. And the value-based care work, I just kept thinking, this is nonsensical to try to lower medical spend and improve medical outcomes without addressing all these behavioral components, whether it's mental health properly or all the social determinants of health elements. Really? The selfish version was, how are you going to judge me on my outcomes if those things are unaddressed? And then the more altruistic lens was, oh, crap. In order for us to really move the needle on lowering total cost of care, we have to weave these things in. And they were so deeply siloed. And I thought, why are we not doing this? So the thesis was like in my sweet spot of things that were irking me and bothering me and frustrating
Which, by
me.
the way, is you joined a Series A company and you weren't the founder. So in truth, you're taking almost founder-like risk. I mean, you know, Michael and other people did a lot of the early work. That's hard. But like Series A, it's, you know, it's still early. And so as I tell people like who think about starting companies, like you have to, it's so hard and the risk is so high that you have to like wake up every morning believing this needs to exist in the world. Otherwise, like you might as well join a later stage company because the risk reward profile does not necessarily make sense unless you really believe that this has to exist.
I think that's right. And all my turns, and we'll get into like the more recent career shift, have been inspired by something that's really bothering me. And I guess that's probably pretty entrepreneurial. I've like looking back, I'm like, that's the DNA of an entrepreneur, right? Like that's bothering the shit out of me. Forgive the language. And,
I love the language.
The system cannot persist this way unless this thing changes. And so I got to go help fix that, right? And so I just felt like I was on my soapbox preaching. Nobody cared about mental health, as you've pointed out. Nobody cared about the integration of mental and physical health.
No one even really talked about it.
And virtual. Like, I mean, all of it was so unique. I mean, 2013 was 7 years pre-COVID.
I mean, virtual when you did AbleTo was telephone.
And it really, I mean, we did deliver a lot of our care by telephone back then.
Yeah. Just to give people a sense of what time period we were in. Right. So let's talk about your transition because you joined a Series A company as the first chief medical officer. Mm-hmm. One of the things I find is people don't necessarily appreciate the difference in stage. Mm-hmm. They know they like the company and what's the product, to your point, that they know they like the team. They may have some good investors, but they don't understand what it means to be a Series A CMO. Mm-hmm. But I don't think this is just about chief medical officer. Series A, chief commercial officer, Series A, chief product officer, whatever. Go down the functional areas. What it means to be Series A versus, even let's say a Series C or growth stage. Very different, I think, obviously risk profiles for sure. But like even very different like skill sets, approach, like willingness to do certain things. Like how would you describe that and what did you learn and like what were the challenges? Because you came from a fancy academic place and now you're probably making your own copies or whatever. How did you think about that?
100%. I'm glad you asked because I think it is different to be in a really early company and mid-stage growth, later stage.
And the good news is you saw it all. You went Series A to Optum, United. So talk to me about the early stages and what you tell your clients.
I mean, early on, you have to have the DNA for just being able to roll your sleeves up and get whatever
shit done.
Gets done. Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. Right. There's no someone's going to build a deck for me. There's no someone's going to make all my appointments for me. There's none of that. Right. So, and having come out of like being a researcher and a fellow and having, there's a lot of like in medicine, actually, you're just doing a lot of your own shit. Right. Like you want. I wrote my own SAS code for my research studies. Like I downloaded the data sets myself. Like I did all the things. So I guess in retrospect, that wasn't that different for me as a young attending, not so recently fellow and, resident. But you just have to know that you have to be willing to just roll up your sleeves and do whatever it needs to get done. And it might be outside of your specific, skill set or wheelhouse, right? So, when we've got our first data set from Aetna to be able to target patients that we thought were at risk and in need of our programs, like that came to me. Like I logged into the SFTP and figured out how the heck to download the data set and figured out how to crunch the data. And then, later only did we have a whole team of data scientists and, a data engineering team who managed all of our pipelines and all of that. But the early days are just turn your eyes and mind and attention to whatever needs to get done. You got to be okay with that.
And I've read some of your stuff about how medicine was a good training for actually being a clinical executive, but like actually residency and fellowship, really interesting. Both you got to do things on your own, and that's sort of the progression. Right? Obviously, at first you're supervised, but then you're owning a lot of it. And then secondly, I assume just like the ability to just do what I admire about my doctor friends.
Yeah.
Even I have a friend who's a leading neurosurgeon. The guy doesn't need to sleep. And entrepreneurship, it's you need to balance it. I know you actually blog post about that, but in the early days, you just gotta. It's a lot about input and hours, honestly.
It's a good point. I'll have to add that to the long list of things from clinical training that actually translate into entrepreneurship. But That's a great point. Yeah. I mean, you're just like a workhorse, right? And we're pretty good as clinicians at being workhorses. So I think the things you do, the other things that we don't think about though is you do stop being the smartest person in the room, and you got to be okay with that. I think I heard someone say you got to leave your ego at.
Yeah.
And I don't disagree with that. And there's plenty of other great, smart people around the table, and you got to figure out how to work together with them. You're no longer the El Jefe, at the top of the chain. You're a part of a team, and you got to figure out how to work with those other experts to get what you need done.
What was the biggest challenge for you making the transition? How do you describe the key areas of responsibility and skill sets and functional domains that a CMO needs? How do you think about what the CMO does and how you sort of position someone best to succeed in that role?
Yeah, I think it's such a fabulous question, and one that we're over the last 10 to 15 years, I think, have learned more and more about. And now I have a talk track to like really articulate this, especially in my new role at Oxeon. My buddy Neil Shaw says this. He's the CMO at Maven, and I have totally stolen it, so I'm giving him credit. Which is that the first note is really, are you an indoor cat or an outdoor cat?
What does that mean?
Meaning, the outdoor cat version of clinician leader is someone that you might deploy externally facing, obviously, by the nomenclature. And those varieties are, you might have thought leadership, someone who's out at conferences, market maker, if you will, like someone who's out there preaching the product or the space. The other version of that, and often they're the same person, someone to be a deep, commercially oriented partner to your growth team. And I did all of that external facing work, right? So those are people who love being out there, willing to be on the road, meeting with payers or hospital systems or whoever your client base is alongside your growth team and really preaching and evangelizing.
It's funny, the outdoor cat thing. I didn't know if you were going to mention it, but I think sometimes entrepreneurs, if they're tech entrepreneurs who come into the healthcare world, which there are more of these days with AI and the like, how important and how powerful that CMO can be in the sales process. It's amazing. I think it's an underappreciated skill.
I would say the same words and that the growth leader would have said, and they're just met differently by the people sitting across the table. And I used to tell my peers, like, please don't feel bad. Like, this is what happens when the attending walks in the room and the medical student has told them, like, we're going to, like, we'll be doing a CT scan today. And they're like, really? Why are we doing that? And the attending comes in and says, we'll be doing a CT scan today. And they're like, okay, great. Thank you. Like, it's exactly the same. Like the chief growth officer says, like, you should buy our product. And I say, you should buy our product. And they just are going to listen, So that's what, like, the MD at the back of my name has, like, earned me the trust of the listener. So I think people don't always appreciate the value. There's so many, that's not the only value, but that is a value. Back to your original, like, what are the different flavors or archetypes of clinician leaders? So the indoor cat is someone more operationally minded, right? So think about a clinical operations leader who, say, is for a care delivery org. That might be someone who's actually hiring and firing the clinicians, supervising the care that's being delivered, setting up all the quality infrastructure, making sure that, the care is delivered in an evidence-based fashion, NCQA certification, URAC certification, all of those things. There are indoor cats that also lean towards product. And increasingly, there are more and more of these people who can think about agile and think about product development and can write PRDs. I mean, think about like Carolyn Jasek at Omada, who kind of held that role. Or
I would also imagine some outdoor cats could be product too, because that commercial product interface is really important.
Yes. I think people tend to major or minor, if you will.
Yeah.
But I think the product lean can go alongside the outdoor cat version, because oftentimes you're sort of bringing insights from the market and then, communicating them back internally to your team. But I also think, and we actually built this at AbleTo, and Pete Chalik and I talked about this on another podcast.
I listened. It was great. We
loved that one. It was fun to like air a little dirty laundry, to be honest. And it wasn't easy.
This is A16Z's podcast that Julie, you and Justin Larkin did with you. I thought it was great.
You got it. Well, and Pete and I had to figure this out because we were building clinical solutions. And at the outset, we didn't have clinicians deeply in the product infrastructure to build clinical solutions. And we had to figure out I built a clinical product team, if you will. And We embedded those folks within the infrastructure so that we could ideate and write PRDs together and actually build and deploy and test and iterate together versus clinicians just being another checkbox on the stakeholder list. But there are increasingly people who are growing up in product and can do clinical product work, if you will.
Totally.
So that's another indoor cat version, if you will.
But by the way, the one thing I'd say, actually, I love the indoor cat, outdoor cat analogy. It's funny, and I think this will resonate. These virtual care models I find are really hard,
Yes.
right? Because you've got to go land the payer or the self-insured employer. Let's just say that's one. And then you've got to go get them to give you their member roles or their employee roles. Then you got to go market to those members, employees, right, and engage them. You got to activate them. You got to retain them. And then after you do all that on the demand side, you then have to figure out how to match these, I'll say, challenging workforce, which is whatever level clinician you want to talk about, whether it be doctors, NPs, whatever, down the line. And you got to match demand and supply, and you got to do it at the time that the demand wants to meet the supply and that the supply is available to meet the demand and the supply is not you working on another appointment. It is freaking hard, these models, right? And so the point I'm going to make about the outdoor cat and indoor cat, I think at a certain stage, you actually want to have both. You want to have an outdoor-facing CMO, and maybe you want an indoor-facing chief clinical officer, operations officer, because, I think it's hard to do both those things, honestly.
So I think most people are not wired to do both. Yeah. I think that people, and this is back to clinician know thyself and all the self-awareness. What are you really great at? What brings you energy? And people, I think, tend to be wired external-facing or internal-facing. And they're more unicorn-like to be able to do both. So for a team, a CEO, or a board that's looking to hire a clinician executive, right? What do you really need them to do? Let's be really thoughtful about what your goals are. And then we can map the qualities and characteristics of the candidate to be able to match what you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to push sales and growth, that's a different person than if you need someone to oversee your W-2 and or 1099 workforce and ensure that they're delivering high quality care. Or you need someone to build a digital solution alongside your product team. These are different humans. And mostly right now, we have built expertise in the clinician executive workforce, and we have to just be really thoughtful about what you need and the characteristics of the person that you'll hire to fill that role.
Yeah. In your current role, I mentioned you're helping folks with this transition, helping companies hire for these roles. I love the fact that you're now a fellow podcaster. Welcome to the world.
Thank you.
You have a podcast called
Happy to be here.
Leadership Rounds, where you interview and talk to clinician executives who are industry leaders who kind of share their journeys and challenges and insights in these roles. I'm curious, what are from being a podcaster, what are the top 3 key things that you've learned along the way from that part of the journey, or maybe that plus your current role? What are the things that you didn't know before that you've taken away from those experiences?
Yeah, podcasting has been fun. And I started that before I joined Oxeon. And it was another one of these what's burning a hole in my belly that I feel needs to be addressed. And actually, I think the inspiration for the podcast, which is focused on clinician executives, was, as I say, in the intro there, is just really shining a spotlight on what great looks like amongst clinician leaders. Because I think there are still such entrenched biases around.
What are those?
I mean, people don't think that clinicians can think like business people. People think we can't hold high clinical quality and business metrics in one. I think they feel like it's a trade-off. And I think really great care and great quality and efficient, financial metrics can go hand in hand, right? I think there's still biases around clinicians being operators or product leaders or commercial leaders. And so the goal here was to show, not tell, but show examples of what good looks like and that these people exist, and to let people hear them and how they talk and how they think about strategy and business ops and all of it, right? And I think now we have so many wonderful people out there. If we can just keep highlighting what good looks like, I think it'll reduce the perception, the misperceptions and the bias that people still hold.
Do you feel like our medical schools do enough to include sort of entrepreneurship and business into the curriculum?
Better, but still a long way to go, I think. So, increasingly, more and more people are getting dual degrees, which is interesting. The Harvard HMS, HBS dual degree program is more than 20 years old now. Think about it. So now we've got a host of folks who are actually getting that training. That said, I think there's still a ton to teach, right? Like just how businesses function. It's not a training ground. I mean, it's learning, I think, the knowledge, but it's
Yeah.
not yet a way to really know how to do the job well when you get over.
Yeah, in some
to
ways
this
we
side of
talked
the
about
house.
how it's there are some phenotypic and work ethic, and you got to get shit done if someone is coding in front of you, you got to like put your hands on them and get it done, right?
Yeah.
There's that. But then on the other hand, it's a pretty hierarchical system, right? It's a lot of rote learning. So there are some things that are not very entrepreneurial about the system that are working against.
Yeah. I actually think there should be a different type of medical education, especially in the AI native
Oh.
world. Yeah.
So let's take that on right now.
Okay.
Well, I mean, if you talked to me 5 years ago, I would have said, wow, Vinod Khosla, when he said 15 years ago, to his credit, that robots, I'm gonna paraphrase, robots are gonna replace doctors. Let's maybe not fully, but he made that prediction. At that point, I was like, wow, this guy he's crazy. Like, that's gonna happen. But
Yeah,
it turns
right.
out he saw the future, and we're moving pretty quickly. For sure, a lot of the back office administration, scribing, scheduling, so much stuff has happened. The pace of change is amazing. And you and I know, like, computer vision, AI machine learning models can read pathology and radiology images better than even some best colleagues in your former institution. That's clear. That's been proven in some papers. We're not there yet, but where do you think we are on this journey of AI? Like, at some point, it's going to do a lot what clinicians do.
Yeah. I mean, we're in the thick of it, right? I think, well, first of all, I don't think data and technology will ever 100% replace people. Because I think people need people. I mean, people's been the thread of every aspect of my career, and I'm not quite willing to let go of the fact that people need people. That said, I think the smart way to do this is to be very thoughtful about the aspects of clinical care that can 100% be replaced by AI and data and technology to free up people to do what people do best. I think the knowledge base that a clinician has to hold, like, you no longer need to be a walking encyclopedia. So I think like medical education has to turn around and build clinicians that are set up to succeed in this environment. Not
And what does that
fighting
look like?
it, like know how to, what are the right ways to use open evidence or whatever other technology is going to be there 5 minutes from now or, a week or a year from now. How do we weave that in and make us be more efficient in the delivery of care? Now, how do we best weave in ambient listening tools? So you're learning in an AI native environment. So I don't think we figured it out. Like you said, where on the journey are we? I think we're kind of we're in it. I don't think we know where we'll land up, but I think we know that we're going to have to train people differently.
Do you see more excitement about clinicians making the transition now, or are you seeing the AI era lead to renewed interest or increased interest?
Yes. And actually, I almost don't even think of it anymore as like making a transition out. Like the people like me are fewer and fewer these days, right? Of someone who was pure academic, didn't know nothing about nothing. Like people took a chance on me, saw some DNA in me and thought I could succeed in an entrepreneurial environment. Like nowadays, when we're doing searches, I'm looking at people who have already some experience in this side of the world. And that pool is large, right? Of people who've been in digital health or been in a business environment. And I think tribute to like the 20-year history now of people getting MD, MBAs and such, right? There's actually a large pool of people with real world experience on this side of the fence.
Right. You have a blog post on Substack called Open Mic, where you share more sort of personal career journey lessons. Like, what's your favorite that you'd share with our listeners to end the pod?
So first of all, I have loved the writing, and I'm a journaler. I have my Moleskine, and I try as often as I can in the mornings to sit and just pour the chaos in my brain onto paper, try to order that chaos. This piece I wrote recently that you referenced earlier, I loved writing, and it really resonated for people, which was trying to pull the lessons we learned in clinical training and how they actually apply. I so many years I kept thinking about the gaps we had. Like,
like you're like an outcast.
Yeah, like what we don't know how to manage. I was feeding the bias, if you will, right? Like
totally.
we don't know how to manage. We never operated, blah, blah, blah. And then I just started changing my tune. Like, my goodness, like there are so many things that we're absolutely great at. Why do we not lean on those, right? I've run codes. Talk about managing in chaos. Like you stand at the foot of the bed, you have to lead the team, you have to identify the problem, you have to, tell people what they need to be doing amidst absolute chaos, right? Navigated ambiguity. Every couple of weeks as an intern, you're swapping services. Okay, now you have 25 oncology patients. Next week, you've got 25 cardiology patients. There's so many of these things.
Yeah,
Having hard
not
conversations.
not only ambiguity, but also just to your point, though, one of the things that you need to do in startups is the slope of learning, right? And like
Yes.
talk about the slope of learning there.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
Having difficult conversations. Like these ones are seared in my brain, like the 40-year-old, in the ICU at the Faulkner with breast cancer. And I had to sit with her husband and two little kiddos and tell them the bad news, right? Like someone said to me, you got to be able to handle, challenging situations. Like, really?
Yeah. Nobody wants to have to turn.
Yeah. So I think we clinicians forget and others don't realize, but we also forget. Like, we have lived. We have done the hard things that actually give us a really strong foundation for being entrepreneurs. And it's not sufficient, of course, but it is just a reminder that we have learned to do hard things. And it's just a question of utilizing those learnings in a different environment.
I love that. It's a great way to end. We say at Bessemer, we always look for a lot of things in teams, but especially in healthcare, but we look for these teams that are bilingual, what we call bilingual, both have a deep appreciation, experience, and understanding of healthcare, but then also like a deep technical, oftentimes, background. And we think the best teams have both. And so I love the work that you're doing to bring more of the folks from the former category into this world because we need them. So
we need all of us, right?
We need all of us. Yeah.
For healthcare innovation to succeed and for us to have an impact, we all have to contribute and play our part. And so, this challenge I'm tackling now, which is to get more great clinician executives at the table to have a voice and to contribute to clinical innovation is great fun. It feels like an honor. I hope in a few years, a legacy will be, Rena put that person in that role and that company succeeded because of
or just elevating the appreciation for this important role, I think is something
completely
you've been doing. So anyways, congrats on the success. I'm glad you're working on something that you think needs to exist and does need to exist out there because you're perfectly suited to do it. And thanks for joining the podcast.
I appreciate it. It's been so much fun, and thank you for having me on.